Hi, my name is Dave. Last year I wrote a book about what our society might look like if we incorporated the values and the practices that we see in Star Trek. I thought it'd be interesting to go through our national discussions from that approach. And of course, last month we had a horrible incident in Parkland, Florida, in which 17 students were murdered in their classrooms. So the national discussion is focused on school safety right now. I'd like to take a look at it from the perspective of our future. How might that discussion go? And before we do, I want to kind of recombobulate things because I want to introduce the Federation News Channel. So I'll be right back. Okay, we should be set. Now, before we begin, I do want to talk about a fundamental difference between us and our future counterparts. In the future, each person is self-actualized, and I talk a lot about this in the book, but basically it means we have reached our potential every day. We strive to do our best. We strive to find meaning in our life. I want to listen to a short clip by Dr. Jordan Peterson, who talks about how we in today's world can begin the process of finding meaning in life. So please take a listen to him, and then I'll be right back.
Any more questions, Yuvi?
Well, we have quite a lot of young listeners, and they often ask us what can they do to sort of contribute to the world or to make their life meaningful. What would you answer to them?
I would say choose your words carefully, learn how to write, learn how to think, learn how to communicate, learn how to articulate yourself. That makes you more powerful than anything else you can possibly do. And then try to make things better. Start with what you can make better. Start by making your relationships with your friends better. Start by making your relationships with your parents better. Start by adhering more carefully to your discipline when you're pursuing something that you think is worthwhile. Straighten yourself out. And you start doing that by stopping doing the things you know you shouldn't do. Simple as that. You know there's a set of things that you're doing. You know you shouldn't do them. Some of them you could even stop. Stop doing them. It'll make you a little more together. And as soon as you're a little more together, there's something else stupid you'll be able to stop doing. Stop doing that. You do that for 3 or 4 years, man, you'll be a whole different person.
There you go. That's Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a very, very qualified individual. You can listen to him a lot if you want to go on YouTube. He's got a lot of videos that talk about a plethora of issues. But as he talks about finding meaning in life, you may have noticed it's a journey that begins with each of us individually. We need to make some efforts. So as we look at the issue of school safety, we're going to have to understand it's going to begin with us. There's things we are going to have to do as individuals. Now, before we begin, one final kind of reminder. We're in the future, and with the future comes people like Mr. Spock or Mr. Data, and as they talk about issues, you'll notice they remove the emotion from that discussion. Now, it's a hard thing to do because we've just had 17 of our children murdered. But from a national policy perspective, we need to stay focused on the problem and try to remember that our anger and rage needs to be checked or at least expressed in a different place, not in the national discussion. All right, let's begin. Obviously, the first step is to state our goal, making schools safer. But I do want to clarify something. We're talking about making it safe from the mass school shootings. There's a lot of discussion to be had from all the other kinds of dangers that happen at school, but we're talking about making schools safer from mass school shootings. This is an excerpt from an article written by James Allen Fox. He's the Lippman Professor of Criminology, Law, and Public Policy at Northeastern University. He's done a lot of study and research in this particular field. I want to draw your attention to the second 2 paragraphs. In fact, I'm going to read them for us. Since 1990, there have been 22 shootings at elementary and secondary schools in which 2 or more people were killed, not counting perpetrators who committed suicide. And whereas 5 of these incidents have occurred over the past 5+ years since 2013, claiming the lives of 27, of course the 17 at Parkland, the latter half of the 1990s witnessed 7 multiple fatality shootings with a total of 33 killed. And he points out that Columbine had 13. I want to put this in context. Right now there's a lot of discussion as if the world is coming to an end. Unfortunately, we've had these kind of incidents for longer periods of time. I'm going to start by reminding us our goal is making schools safer. The reason I am reiterating this is right now our national discussion is focused on guns, whether it's gun bans or gun restrictions. Some are talking about a repeal of the Second Amendment. That is not our discussion. Our discussion should be making schools safer. To do this, though, I do want to address the issue of guns first. I want to present some data and some facts about guns in relationship to mass school shootings, and then we can move our discussion in a different direction, perhaps. The data I will include is from the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting database, and you can see the website at the bottom of this page here. I'm not going to do any cherry picking of data, and that is to say we'll look at this kind of data over a long period of time, and we're not going to focus on one single event. We need to look at the whole picture. Okay, so in this spreadsheet, I'm just going to look at the year 2016 so I can explain something I'm going to do with this data. If you look at the upper right-hand corner in that blue area, we can see that there were a total of 15,000 murders, a little over 15,000. 11,000 by firearms, 7,100 by handguns, 374 by rifles. Now there is a little bit of a problem if you look at that small blue box where it says 3,077 and go over to the left. This is for firearms type not stated. So the local municipalities or cities will report to the FBI, and there's 3,077 reports of murder with a firearm where a specific type of gun is not stated. So I have to adjust for that. Let me explain how I'm going to adjust for that. I'm going to extrapolate from the actual numbers we already have. And what that means is I'm going to take that 374 rifle number, and I calculated that it represents 3.98% of the 11,004 number, which is the total firearms. I took that 3.98% and applied it to the outstanding 3,077 unknown rifles or firearms. That comes up to 122. I simply added the 122 to the 374 for a total of 496. I did this to all the data you're about to see. I think it's a more accurate representation of actual deaths by rifles. Here is the data of rifle murders since 1993. This number includes my adjustment that I just explained. As you can see, the general trend is fewer murders with rifles. Now, 2016 is hopefully just an exception, although the Las Vegas shooting is sure to have an impact. For the last several years, less than 300 people per year have been murdered with rifles. What is interesting is looking at gun sales during this same period. That's that purple stripe. I just kind of overlaid it on that graph. Annual sales have tripled from 9.1 million in 1999 to 27.5 million in 2016. Looking at this data tells us more guns does not, or at least has not, meant more deaths. The data tells us the exact opposite. Deaths go down despite the number of guns. Now, we just saw data. This is a fact. This is not a liberal or conservative thing. This is just a simple fact. This is what has happened in our country. Murders are going down. Murders with rifles are going down as the number of guns are going up. So, banning guns will not necessarily have any impact on school safety. However, our whole discussion is about banning guns. We are not talking about making schools safer anymore. What happened immediately following the shooting was a national cry for let's do something about making schools safer. And then the cry was shut down very quickly, and we went from making schools safer to a political agenda item. The march that happened last week around the country, it was all about gun control. We just saw evidence that that doesn't have an impact on school safety, but that's what we're marching about now. All of a sudden, we're not talking about the issue, we're talking about a political agenda. And it started with gun control. And of course, with the discussion about gun control, the discussion of banning assault weapons can easily be had, further away from school safety, but closer to a political agenda. And for some, banning an assault weapon isn't enough. Some would like to get rid of the NRA. So the problem is we've shifted from talking about school safety, and now we're jumping on a political bandwagon. This does not help us solve the problem. This doesn't make schools safer. Emotions, anger, and outrage, some of which is being driven by teenagers, is pushing the discussion further and further away from getting schools to be safer. Remember this slide? I have to show it again. I just saw a protester holding up a sign saying, "Guns do kill people." They do not. Look at facts. You may believe that in your heart, but look at facts. We've had a tripling of the purchasing of guns annually, and murders are going down. These aren't particularly nice guns. These aren't friendly guns. These are guns. It's the people. It's the behavior that's changing. And that's what we have to focus on when it comes to this. The longer we get stuck on the gun issue, the longer it will take us to really solve the issue of school safety. In terms of banning an assault weapon, we did that. From 1994 to 2004, we banned the AR-15. Did it make a difference for school safety? Well, this data shows us that it could have influenced a couple of years in which the national murder rate went down. From 1997 to 1999, you see a really significant drop. On the other hand, if you look to the right of the graph, from say 2008 or 9 on, we had fewer murders than we did during the whole 10-year period of the gun ban. And regardless of this data, this isn't about school safety. This data is the national murder record. Let's see if we can hone in on how the ban affected school safety. Let's take another look at that slide of the summary data from Professor Fox. We already know that in the last half of the 90s, 33 students were murdered at school, and in a 5-year period. And in the last 5 years, we've had 27 students murdered. So that tells us that no, the ban did not make schools safer. In fact, in the particular years of 1997-98, we had 4 shootings at schools. They highlighted there Mississippi, Kentucky, Oregon, and Arkansas. The very years in which the national murder rate went down significantly, we had an increase in incidents of school shootings. The ban does not make schools safer. As we are more focused on the political agenda, we lose sight of what our goal is, to make schools safer. We are set up Americans now to fight against each other. We've got the Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, the same old, same old. We're talking about an issue that has nothing to do with making schools safer. The facts are there. You can't dispute those facts. You can ignore them, but you can't dispute them. And rather than coming together to fix a national problem, we are going to stand face to face, toe to toe, and argue over something that has no connection to the problem. This is the fundamental difference of our future counterparts and us. In the future, they would have looked at the data and said, well, the gun ban doesn't work. The gun restriction thing seems to not work. What else can we do? They would ask that question. We aren't there. We can't ask that question. We are stuck. We are locked in a political battle now, and schools will remain unsafe. And as we have all come to expect with any political battle, rhetoric starts flying. The NRA is being attacked on a level I've never seen before. Members are being accused of murder. The association is being accused and indicted as an evil organization. Does this make schools safer? No, not at all. But we're no longer talking about school safety. We're talking about guns. And in that political discussion, anything is fair game. Well, let's take a look at some data. Let's just see how the NRA is impacting mass school shootings. Now here's a graph of the NRA members who have been involved in mass shootings in the United States. And this goes beyond school campuses. This is from 1968 to present day. So as we see, 1968, it starts off, fortunately, where it's zero. And we get into the 70s up through the 80s, that number hovers right around zero. Now, from the 80s all the way through to the end of the century, that number, as you can see, goes right in through and around zero. As we get into the 21st century, we see the number hitting the number zero. And that is the number we're at 2015, zero. Not one NRA member. Now, I'm being a little facetious here, but you get the point. This, to me, suggests that allowing children to make policy for the United States might not be a good idea. Upset children at that. Indeed, anyone who understands child development will tell you that high school kids' brains are not fully developed. In particular, the frontal lobe, which impacts reasoning, impulsivity, and the ability to understand there are consequences for their actions. That is no way to run a national discussion. That's no way to set policy. If I was Captain Janeway, I would just be shaking my head going, my God, I'm glad I'm not in that sector anymore. Well, I'm going to digress a bit because I got very frustrated over the last couple of weeks, and this past week in particular, with all the assaults and attacks on the NRA. You're looking at the page I just saw last night when I signed up to join the NRA. I'm not a gun person, and I don't know if I'll continue my membership. But not only is the discussion, the national discussion, moving away from school safety, it's exceptionally unfair attacks on members of an organization that have demonstrated no hostility, that for all intents and purposes are absolutely peaceful Americans, and we have a national media and politicians that are allowing children to call those people murderers. So I went ahead and joined NRA to stand with them. And I'm going to continue my segue just a bit because I think there are some important things that need to be said about this gun debate, although it has nothing to do with school safety. I went to the hashtag Never Again site, and it defaulted, I guess, to the hashtag March for Our Lives site. And I just want to point it out because, as you can see, look at all the discussion they're having about school safety. If you scroll down, if you go to the site and scroll down, you'll find nothing about school safety. It is about guns, it's about rallies, it's about legislation to restrict guns, it's about legislation or discussions to ban guns, nothing to do with school safety. The stated goal in the very beginning, we got locked on a political agenda item, and we're no longer talking about what we need to talk about. What we are doing, though, is making Americans hate each other more. I know hate's a strong word, but you get a sense of that. We're creating conflict rather than solving a problem, and we're doing it almost seamlessly within the context of our society. In our future, our counterparts would be scratching their heads, how stupid can you be? This is where the difference between our future counterparts and our own society today is just glaring. Where we are stuck in a political battle, where we are stuck on trying to separate each other from ourselves, the future would say, well, we looked at facts, and the facts tell us the gun ban won't work, and the facts tell us that trying to restrict guns won't work. In fact, it kind of tells us it goes beyond just the gun. It has something to do with the people involved. So from that perspective, they would start having a discussion of campus safety, which is what we should be doing. And as I see it, there's generally two kind of areas. One would be the campus protection, the actual facility, and the other would be the event prevention. So you have protection and prevention. And I just jotted down some things that come to mind. Campus entry, open campus versus closed campus, bulletproofing different windows and reception areas. What do you do with security guards? Where do you house them? How do you house them? What are the protocols for them? Campus IDs for people coming on campus. Maybe there should be a parking lot gate and they have to slip an ID through there before they get in a parking lot. And then security cameras that maybe have a direct feed into police departments. All of these things should be discussed right now. We should be talking about making our campus safer. And this would fall into that. Then the other one would be prevention. This has to go into whole and healthy families. School bullying. What kind of counseling is available? What are our mental health policies? How do they impact the issue? What about law enforcement communications? Could we improve what's going on with maybe the school resource officer and the records of some of the students? I know there's laws and things we have to consider, but again, in our future, our counterparts would be having these discussions instead of saying, we want to take your guns. You can't have our guns. But we want to take your guns. You can't have our guns. No, but we want to take your guns. You can't have our guns. How silly are we? We should all be ashamed of ourselves. We should be focused on campus safety. We looked at guns first because that seemed to pop up in everyone's mind. The data says the guns aren't the issue. Let's look at these other things. Why aren't we caring about campus safety? I'm going to answer my own question. The reason we went from school safety to these demands for gun control and banning guns and the NRA members, despite all of the data, it's because it's an election year. And this makes for good headlines. There's money to be made and there's power to be had. Our first mistake was to ignore facts. That's something our future counterparts, of course, would never do. Now, if you remember Dr. Peterson's discussion at the beginning of this video, where he talked about one of the first things we can do as young people to provide greater meaning in our lives is basically search. You're going to learn. You're going to learn how to read and articulate and write, and you're going to learn how to build relationships around you. Ignoring data is the exact opposite of that. That's part of that process of learning. Anyway, we ignore the data, so now we can make it a political issue. With a political issue, we can get the media involved. And it's just amazing how the media provides this platform for essentially traumatized kids. Kids who should be in counseling are in front of TV cameras, in front of the nation, screaming out their frustration, their anger, and their rage. In fact, it went to a point that it was kind of dangerous. Last month, we had our first state-sponsored political protest. I mean, they say it was a march for school safety. It was not. It was about guns on those school rallies last month. There were students, I saw videos of students who were saying, well, we should talk about mental health, or no, I'm all for guns. People kill people, not guns. They were told to leave the event. Go back to class. We want to talk about guns. The media and politicians are using our children shamelessly. We're a far way away from our future counterparts, but we can get there. Somewhere in our future, people will realize the way to solve a problem is to look at and accept the facts and then move on beyond them. We can't seem to do that. We constantly get locked into a battle. Just imagine if in 2012, after the Sandy Hook massacre, if politicians came together and said, okay, we know it's not about guns, let's start making campuses tighter. Let's start identifying who's coming in and who's leaving. Should we put these cameras up or that? All the strategies that I talked about a little bit earlier, what if we had had those discussions 6 years ago? And take it back even further. What if we had that discussion back in 1999 when Columbine was attacked? Instead, we talked about guns. That's all we do is talk about guns. We don't do anything. We talk about guns. There's so much more to be discussed. And in our future, we're going to get there. So I would say as a first step, kind of following in Dr. Peterson's advice, we need to look at ourselves, and his advice was to the individual. I would say as a society, we need to start asking ourselves, when will we start accepting facts? When will we stop allowing politicians to tell us what the argument is? We know pure and simple, if that campus was more secure, and there's a lot of things that went wrong actually at Parkland, but I won't get into that here. But we know pure and simple, if the campus had been more secure, if we had some very strict protocols as to how people can enter onto the parking lot and from the parking lot onto the campus, that could have prevented it all. And then if they got on campus, if we had some pretty strict protocols and facility structures to make it difficult for them to get past any kind of lobby, I'm not sure anyone would have died. We could have had that discussion 6 years ago. We could have had that discussion almost 20 years ago, which means by now we'd be really good at it. We will not fix the problem until we fix ourselves. Let's find out what we're doing wrong and be honest with ourselves and tell us we got to change. As Dr. Peterson said, if you're not willing to stop doing the bad things you know are bad, you're not going to see the progress. We know it's bad to just stop and get locked on this discussion about guns rather than campus safety. Let's stop doing that. Okay, thank you for watching the first official United Federation news broadcast. I hope you gleaned something from it. Please leave any comments you wish to. I'd love to hear. Just to let you know, my book, Make It So, is available at Amazon.com.